Welcome to this segment of the second act. My name is Susan Hirsch and I'm your host. We are on location at the home of Elaine and Francis McGillicuddy. Their lives have been shaped by politics, human relations, their deep and abiding love for one another, and by an insatiable intellectual curiosity. Their journey of their life has also placed them at times at odds with the main teachings of the Catholic Church. But despite that, their faith has defined their lives in an integral way. Join me in welcoming Francis and Elaine McGillicuddy. Francis and Elaine, you have shared with me that your life's journey has been substantially about listening and being faithful to what you call your voice of conscience. Francis, can you tell us, when you were a young man just out of seminary and the Vietnam War was sort of in the background of your lives, what events brought the Vietnam War and that conflict to the forefront for you?
Yes, well, that's true, but I'd like to back up to an event that occurred which brought me into the decision to be a priest, and that was reading Thomas Merton's Seven-Story Mountain.
And what was it specifically about that book and that piece of writing that changed you?
I think it was, here was a worldly young man, brilliant, and had a lot of possibilities in his life, and of all the choices that he made this choice to go into the monastery, and it gave me a sense of, oh, one's life can have a certain destiny to it, and that kind of really grabbed my attention and brought me forward into studying to be a priest.
Mm-hmm. But then some events unfolded with the war as a background that maybe began to change your destiny a little bit. What were those events?
Yes, well, the Vietnam War was raging, and I was working in the ordained priesthood and wasn't thinking about the implications of the war. Seems as though I was engaged in my ministry and also working out my own growth problems at the time. Mm-hmm. And then a young man comes to me and says, a young Catholic man from the parish says, I think I'm a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War, to this mm-hmm. war, mm-hmm. and would you be my witness before the draft board? Mm-hmm. Well, this was a kind of a big decision that I had to make. So I kind of went back to the books and looked at it, and I said, well, there's nothing in Catholic doctrine that prevents my going before the draft board. Mm-hmm. So we went before the draft board. The draft board turned his conscientious objector status down. Mm-hmm. And then they engaged a Quaker attorney who took the case to federal court in Portland. Mm-hmm. And by the time that the case came to federal court, I was already sent from Westbrook up to Waterville. And I came down from Waterville to go to the hearing mm-hmm. before Judge Edward Janeau, a federal judge. And the judge granted him a conscientious objector status. And this really changed my way of thinking. It just clarified how governments operate mm-hmm. and how wars are declared mm-hmm. and what war is about.
And I know that this witness, and I think others that you did, have led to other peace and social justice activities throughout your life. Can you tell us about, just quickly, a few of those?
Well, I think one of the first ones after Elaine and I were married was being involved in what we called conscientious war tax objection, mm-hmm. or some people call it war tax resistance. Mm-hmm. And we did some kind of symbolic war tax resistance around the nuclear weapons issue back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And then we went to the New York rallies mm-hmm. in 82, 750,000 people going to the New York rally. That was a big event mm-hmm. at that time. Mm-hmm. And since that time, I've gone to Bath Iron Works when they've mm-hmm. Started these Aegis cruisers and various activities like that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And Elaine, I know that you have participated in many of these activities even back when you were an Ursuline nun, but you also both started going to more conferences that I believe were sponsored by the Catholic Church, and that led you to meet a whole other community of people like the Father Berrigans. And how did that propel you then into another big change in your life by listening to this voice of conscience?
Well, after I left the convent, I had been an English teacher in the convent, mostly an English teacher, and so we were having a retreat with Dan Berrigan. Mm-hmm. I had taught by then about 23 years, mm-hmm. and when I came home from the retreat, I guess I was ready for it. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning realizing I needed to quit my job, and it was time for something else. I had discovered yoga by that time, though, mm-hmm. but I was also involved in helping set up Friendship House and was very impressed with the work of Catholic Worker and mm-hmm. the Berrigans, and so I was between, struggling, deciding if I should go for yoga or helping with a shelter. And then it was another Phil Berrigan retreat that we went to after Liz had come out of jail.
Liz being Phil's
Yes,
wife.
yes.
Right.
After I had left teaching for 2 years, when at that retreat I realized that the path of yoga is a way of peacemaking. By then we had already done war tax resistance. We did that for 8 years.
Can you help me understand how yoga is a part of peacemaking?
Wars begin in the heart. Our thoughts precede action. And so when we have a yoga class, there are Republicans and Democrats and people of all persuasions there, but they get in touch with their own selves. Wars happen when people react to things, but yoga teaches people how to observe that we are not our thoughts and that we don't have to choose to follow these immediate emotional reactions that we have, and that we can be more mindful. And it's a nourishing kind of practice. And so we don't need more things. Also, wars are about, propelled by greed. And yes, yoga creates peace. Yoga is union with the self and others and the planet.
And you both actually have continued this journey with your yoga. As I understand, up to the present day, you've been teaching yoga classes at the Cumberland County Jail?
Yes, we have. We started doing that about 10 years ago when Susan Crane, the Plowshares person, and the rest of the Plowshares were in the Cumberland County Jail, and Susan was the only woman in the group. I visited her, and she said they'd like to have yoga, and we started with Susan and been doing it ever since. Mm-hmm.
How wonderful. It does seem, when I look at your lives, that every 10 to 15 years, this voice of conscience pulls you in a different direction. And I know one of the things that you believe you got involved in the 80s was this Dances of Universal Peace. Tell us a little bit about that, and how does that fit in maybe also to this peacemaking and reflection that you've been doing?
Well, it was really in the 90s. The Dances of Universal Peace were begun by Samuel Lewis during the Vietnam War as a way of peacemaking, when people get together to dance and sacred dances from different religious traditions. And so I went to Chicago as a yoga teacher for this week-long workshop on the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, knowing no one there. And I realized, that was another big conversion for me. I realized I was on my way to turning 60 that fall, that I was meant to lead these. And it uses all my gifts. I do it once a month at the studio. So I teach dances from the Hebrew tradition. I love languages, and then Aramaic and Arabic and Sanskrit and all the languages. And so it's respecting the different cultures. It's highlighting diversity.
And I want in our remaining time to make sure we have a chance to talk a little bit about where you both are now. I know, Elaine, you're very caught up in what you've called ecofeminism. And it seems to me that this is really another extension of your journey, even with your own faith and the Catholic Church and your teachings. So what is ecofeminism, and how does that fit in?
Oh, it's hard to... I'm learning more about...
Very succinctly.
Right, yes. Concern about the earth and nature. It's a way of being that is not the dominator model, but the partnership model, working in conjunction with nature on all levels and not dominating others, which is what leads to wars, which is the culture of the past many years now. And the whole world is shifting into, there's a great turning happening. We're moving toward an age of sustainability because people have to.
I know that you had shared with me a wonderful, I don't know, it's a poster or what, which sort of sums up your lives. It's that ready, get set, grow. And on that note, I'm afraid we're probably out of time, but I want to thank you both so much for opening your home to us today.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.